Today's lesson, we're talking all things carbs, breaking them down, talking also about some tracking tips. Carbohydrates are your body's main immediate energy source. For most people, this is the case. They can greatly affect your health and your performance. The way that carbs work, so digestion begins in the mouth and then passes into the intestine in general. All the time. Your body breaks down the carbs into glucose, which is like a simple sugar essentially. That then enters the bloodstream, and you can kind of see on here as well. As your blood sugar level rises, your pancreas, if you have a working pancreas, it releases a hormone called insulin. Now, that insulin function helps to move that sugar, that glucose, to your body's cells where it is used or stored for energy. Very basic carb function. There's two main types of carbohydrates, simple and complex. Simple carbs are digested faster. They're easier to break down. They are better for more immediate energy needs. Again, carbs can either be used immediately or they can be stored. The best times to have simple carbs are going to be around your training or around periods of higher exertion. Again, if you are expending a lot of energy and you need fast energy, this is where they come from. The thing is, if most of your carb intake is from simple carbs, most of your intake for the entire day, then you do have a higher risk of things like elevated triglyceride levels, quote unquote bad cholesterol, and insulin resistance, where that function that we just talked about, it doesn't necessarily work optimally. Insulin keeps being released to help, and your glucose response isn't optimal. The other type is complex carbs. So these are digested and absorbed slower. They can help to control insulin response. So there's not so much of that spike dip. There's a little bit more even keel, not so much of a crash versus if you just eat simple carbs by themselves outside of activity. They can help control energy levels, more sustained energy. They can greatly help with body composition. They may help reduce triglycerides, improve your cholesterol profile. Complex carbs are ones that usually have fiber and are more nutrient dense, okay? So they likely have a lot more micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, and fiber. When we look at how our body responds to simple versus complex carbs, if we were eating these things just by themselves, so this is what the graph would look like with your blood sugar levels. If you're just eating these carbs by themselves, there's no protein with these, there's no fat with them. So if you were just to eat simple carbs totally by themselves, things like sugar, soda, candy, a syrup, something like that, there's going to be that blood sugar increase, and then insulin kicks in, and there's this big drop that can happen. Now, if you're eating just complex carbs by themselves, things like vegetables, fruit, whole grains, things that have a higher fiber content in them, there's not so much of that spike here we see with the blue. There's a smaller spike and it's a lot more even keeled here. Faster digesting, slower digesting. Now, if you were to eat carbohydrates coupled with something like protein, then this isn't going to be as intense either. So it can be a lot more even keeled. And that's why we also want to suggest that you don't eat carbs totally by themselves, part of the reason, unless it's during intense activity. You have resources with lists of nutrient dense, less nutrient dense carbs, fiber, etc. So these are just some more examples of nutrient dense carbs remembering that fiber and micronutrients, which are vitamins and minerals, are part of these sources. Also knowing, some of these sources are going to contain other things like protein, healthy fats as well. For example, chickpeas are also going to have protein in them as well. Less nutrient dense carb options we talked about. These are simpler sugar, some cereals, candies, white breads or pastas, things that have a lower fiber content, honey, soda, these types of things. If you're unsure, then you can always look at the nutrition label and look for fiber content. So just a little recap on carbohydrates, remembering that they are fuel. This is your body's main fuel source. A lot of them contain essential vitamins and minerals, especially those complex carbs, and fiber, which you also have learned or will learn is really, really important. And carbs are just tasty AF. We like them, right? We don't want to demonize them. They're beneficial for our brain, our heart, our muscles, our overall health, recovery, and performance. They're not addicting. Carbs are not fattening or inherently bad. We know that carbs can get a bad rap sometimes, bad rep sometimes, and are associated with things like weight gain or energy crashes. That this all really depends on you and what your intake looks like. Oversized portions and the quality of your choices can often lead or contribute to excess calories, which we know if you're in a surplus of calories or energy, then that can lead to being in a total surplus in general, right? Excess weight. We know that weight gain and fat gain with carbs in mind are different, because when there's carbs present, there's also water present. Carbs being pulled into the muscle, there's a lot more water present now in that muscle. So sometimes you can see weight gain go up if you're eating more carbs, but that doesn't mean that it's fat, okay? So just a couple tips for prep, planning, tracking. You're planning carb sources for the week. You're already focusing on protein, so you want to plan out your carb sources for the week, making sure that you're getting mainly complex carb sources and that you have some simple carb sources, maybe with your performance, or if you have some special things planned. Make sure that you have sources available. They're in your house, or you're keeping, fruit handy in your bag or your car, that you actually have them available to you and they are things that serve you. Cook, meal prep, use your tools, do bulk prep, cook a whole bunch of rice, cook a whole bunch of potatoes to have a bunch of fruit, grill a bunch of vegetables, have these things prepped. Bulk prep is immensely helpful. Log your carbs ahead of time, especially if you're aiming to hit fiber goals. This is really, really important. If you're having a hard time meeting your carb goals, whether you're too high or you're too low, logging ahead of time helps you with this. It can also help kind of spread these things out. Have those easy grab and go options or pre-made options that I had talked about, or other options we've talked about. And if you're eating out, then just be really, really mindful where the carbs are in the meals, what the carb sources are in the meals. Try to get some kind of a complex carb source with that, whether it's a salad or some vegetables on the side, a baked potato. Just being mindful as you're eating out where your carbs are coming from and what the makeup and quality of them is. As you fine-tune your macro tracking or just awareness in general, paying attention to weighing and measuring. So knowing something like if you're measuring cooked rice, then you are logging it as cooked rice, not a raw rice or uncooked rice. That will be a drastic difference. So make sure you're getting specific there. If you're doing something like 1 cup or one item, like one banana, bananas can be really different size. sizes. And this can make a difference over time, where we talk about we want to gain awareness to what 130 grams of banana actually looks like versus just guessing medium, because there's a much larger margin of error there. And that can be really frustrating when you have something like a fat loss goal in mind, and we want to make sure that you're in a calorie deficit. You're just increasing accuracy here. One cookie, what does that even mean? So be more specific when you're logging things, and as you're looking at things, get as accurate as you can here. Accuracy and specificity. Again, planning out your carbs throughout the day according to your goal. So there's some different approaches here, but we do want to do planning and not just winging it. You can evenly spread out your carbs throughout the day, however many meals you have, or maybe you have some larger meals that you're aiming for, let's say 30 to 40 grams of carbs with. Again, this depends on your goal. You want to look at your total for the day and then kind of spread it out. Maybe you have some snacks that or mini meals that are some lower carb amounts in there. You can strategize where you have higher carb amounts around your workouts and then lower carb amounts further away from your workouts. This can depend, again, what your goal is, what the amounts are, but if performance is really important to you, especially, wherever, then you want to increase your carb amounts peri-workout. So before, after, maybe during. If you're doing intra-workout carbs, then simple carbs during your workouts can be really, really helpful here. And we'll talk about that greatly in a different lesson. Aim to not have carbs totally by themselves outside of training and workouts. Again, we don't want to experience those big crashes energy-wise, or for our blood sugar, for our health, it's not the best for us. So we want to, and also satiety, carbs by themselves isn't very filling. So that's why when you just eat carbs, you're still hungry afterwards. So aiming not to eat them by themselves. And always when you are doing any type of tracking, just estimate to the best of your ability. Continuing to log your food, if that's the track that you're on, or you're tracking portions, whatever it is, before you eat as much as possible. Again, putting yourself into that position of power, that position of control, where you are creating what that day looks like, what those meals look like. You're logging as accurately as possible with your portions. We just talked about that with weighing, with measuring, with what the labeling is on it. And you're actually looking at that. So you have an awareness of, this is what 40 grams of oatmeal looks like. This is what a serving of oatmeal looks like for myself. This is what what 20 grams of carbs in a banana looks like. Create awareness for this for yourself, so you don't need your scale or your tracker down the line in order to know. And also paying attention to how you feel when you're eating certain foods. This is important as well. Investigate which foods are great nutrient-dense sources. Where are you getting a lot of your fiber from? Pay attention to your fiber goal in general. And then focusing on, okay, well, what are less nutrient-dense carb sources? How do I feel when I eat these? How do I feel when I eat these with the protein? Explore and start to learn these things, because these are skills, and they're skills and lend to your experience.